Hey, how's it going everyone? Ram here and welcome to another epic video and welcome to the third episode of Lightroom Mobile Masterclass series. So great to have your smiling faces today in this video, and in today's tutorial we'll be taking a look at how you can use the color tab inside Lightroom Mobile and take your images go from this to this all within minutes. So without further ado, let's go. So right before we jump into the tutorial, let me just tell you why you guys must use the color tab available inside Lightroom Mobile, which is creative color grading. Creative color grading is a process in photo editing where you will be manipulating each individual colors present in your image to make your images more cinematic. So without further ado, let's create some cinematic images using the color tab in Lightroom Mobile. So this is how the color page looks like inside Lightroom Mobile, and this is going to be the image where we are going to deal all our color grading process onto. And I have made some basic adjustments onto the image using the light tab and the curves option inside Lightroom Mobile. And by the way, if you guys want to know more about light tab and curves option, I have made a tutorial based on it. You guys could check it out in the description or in the card here as well. Once you have done all the basic adjustments using the light tab, you are now good to go with the color tab. First off, we have the temperature slider. Basically, the temperature slider is used for maintaining white balance in the image. So if I just drag the slider towards left side, it's going to result in a bluer image or a cooler image, and if I just drag it towards right side, we are going to get a warmer image or a yellowish kind of image. So if I just double tap, it's going to reset the slider. I'm going to park the slider around 4%, and that looks perfect. And next comes the tint slider. The tint slider is also like the temperature slider, but the tint slider is used for maintaining skin tones in the image. If I drag it towards left side, it's going to result in a greener image, and if I drag it towards right side, it's going to result in a pinkish image. So I'm going to reset the slider first. Use the tint slider only if you have any kind of skin tone issues on your image, because you guys could have any kind of green tint or magenta tint onto your skin tones if you guys are handling portrait photography stuffs. So I am not going to touch the tint slider since I don't have any kind of skin tone issues. And next comes the vibrance slider. Before moving to vibrance slider, let me tell you that if you guys are dealing with any kind of music video images and you guys want to have a particular look, you guys could use the temperature and tint sliders and push them as per your wish so that you can get the particular look that you want. And let's deal with the vibrance slider. Basically, the vibrance slider affects the lessly saturated parts of your image. If I drag it towards right side and if I drag it towards left side, it's going to take most of the saturation out of the image, resulting in a kind of desaturated image, not a black and white image. So let me park the vibrance around 4% or 5%, and that looks perfect. And next comes the saturation slider. Basically, the saturation slider affects the saturation of the overall image, including both lessly saturated and also the saturated parts of the image, resulting in a worse looking or a grungy image. So if I just drag it towards right side, you can see it's going to result in a worse image. And if I just drag it towards left side, it's going to take all the juices out of the image, making the image more black and white. And talking about black and white, I'll be doing a future tutorial in the channel based on how you can use the black and white option and take your videography and photography to the next level. So for this image, I'm going to park the saturation around around 4%. So that looks perfect. So we have made some basic changes using the main four sliders, which are temperature, tint, vibrance and saturation. So now we are good to go with the creative color grading process, which is also called as the HSL tab inside Lightroom. It is located on the top right corner of the color tab, which has a color palette icon on it. Simply click on it and there you go. You are now good to go to create some cinematic images. I have made some changes. Let me reset the tabs. So basically, hue, saturation, luminance is called as the HSL tab. The hue is going to change the color of the particular color that you are going to touch, and the saturation is going to affect the overall intensity of the color that you are going to touch, and finally the luminance is going to affect the brightness of the color that you are going to touch. So if I drag the hue towards left side of the red color, it's going to create a pinkish image on the wall and also near the mouth of the particular subject that I am using. And if I just drag it towards right, it's going to make it more orangish. So let me park it around -4 and that looks perfect. Then comes saturation. Basically it's going to increase and decrease the intensity of the image, or to be more precise, it's going to affect the overall thickness of the color. If I just drag it towards left, it's going to take all the colors out of it. So I don't like to touch the saturation of red basically because most of your subjects has red color skin tone, or they might have some red color issues with the other kind of things. So let's don't touch the saturation of red. If just needed you can touch, but mostly I don't like to touch it. And next comes luminance. Luminance is going to affect the brightness of the wall, and if I just decrease it, it's going to darken up the wall. I'm going to park it around -2 or -4, and yeah, that looks pretty decent. And next comes orange color. Basically the orange color has two sides. One is going to be the red if I just drag it towards left, and it's going to have a greenish or yellowish image if I just drag it towards right. So I would like to park the hue around -3%, and yeah, that looks pretty decent. And coming into saturation, since I'm going out for a carnival look which has a vintage vibration on it, I'm going to take the saturation out of orange around -6 or -8%, and in fact going around -12 looks pretty decent. And there is one more rule in color grading, which is if you take down the saturation, increase the luminance so that the color pops out well, and if you increase the saturation, take out that luminance, it's going to make the colors more poppy and also saturated. Since I have decreased the saturation, I'm going to take the luminance around 10, and that looks pretty decent. The face is more brighter than what we started with. And next comes yellow. Most of the skin tone issues are with yellow and orange colors, so try to play with yellow and orange a little bit decent and try to make it more subtle so that your color grading looks natural and cinematic. So if I just drag the hue towards left of yellow, it's going to make it more orangish, and if I just drag it right, it's going to create an yellowish or greenish image. Since I don't have any kind of yellow color skin tone on my image, I'm not going to touch the yellow's saturation and luminance, even the hue itself. And next comes green. Since I don't have any kind of green, I'm not going to touch this, but in the future example I'll be showing you how green affects the overall image. And next comes aqua. Since I don't have aqua, I'm not going to touch it. And next comes blue. Basically if I just drag the blue towards left side, it's going to give a tealish color. So you guys could see behind the telescope, if I just drag it towards left, it's going to make it more aqua green, and if I drag it towards right, it's going to make it more purple. So let me park it around -22, since I would like to have a teal and orange kind of look on the vintage vibration. And I'm going to take the saturation out of it a little bit. Since these need to be a little bit black, these are all foam cores, I'm going to take the luminance and bring it down a little bit so that it looks pretty decent. And finally comes magenta. So if I just drag the magenta towards left, it's going to make a bluish image, and if I drag it towards right, it's going to give you a purple image. Since we don't have more of magenta on our image, let me just drag the saturation down, and yeah, it affects the back side of the particular wall near my subject. So if I just drag the saturation down, it's going to take all the juice out of it. And let me just brighten it up a little bit around 7%, looks perfect. And finally comes purple. If I take it towards left, it's going to give you a magenta image, and if I drag it towards right, it's going to give you a red color image. So let me just park it around 56%, so it also gets matched with the wall. And let me drag the saturation up a little bit and take my hue down a little bit. And finally on the luminance, I'm going to darken it up a little bit around -4. And with our creative color grading process, we have taken this image into this, and this is not yet done because we are going to do a process called as color grading, which is touching the highlights, shadows and midtones of the particular image, and also going to affect the offset or the global color of the image. So let me click on done, and that's it. Now we are good to go with the color grading process. Basically the color grading tab is located in between the black and white tab and the HSL tab right here in the middle. So if I click on it, we have all our color grading options right inside Lightroom Mobile. Pretty cool, right? We have our shadows, midtones, highlights, and finally the global offset. Basically The shadows are going to be the darkest parts of your image, and the highlights are going to be the brightest parts of your image, and anything in between shadows and highlights is going to be the midtones. Finally, the global offset is going to affect your overall image, whether it may be hue, saturation or luminance. And if you guys are into video editing, this is called as the color wheels concept, where you will be individually making changes to shadows, midtones and highlights, and even in the global offset. So if you guys are into video editing, this video might be a bit helpful for you. Since I am going out for a teal and orange look, I am going to take my shadows hue to around 180, where I get a tealish look. And if you guys want to have sliders of hue and saturation, you can simply click on the arrow mark near the shadows. So it opens up all the hue saturation sliders. So you can simply drag in between so that you can go under the hues. So I'm going to make it around 185 or so, and that gives me a teal kind of look. So right here around 182 is perfect. Since I would like to show you how it affects the overall shadows, I'm going to drag my saturation way around 80%, and you guys could see how it's affecting all the darkest parts of the image. So I'm getting more of a teal look, but try to make sure that you go for a subtle look, because it can ruin your overall image when you get an output of the particular image that you want. But if you guys are doing any kind of music video images and you guys want to have a shot matching thing, you can push the look however you want. So I'm going to take my shadows saturation around 25%, and that looks perfect. In order to make the issue more subtle, I'm going to drag my luminance back down towards -20, and it makes a subtle change. And next comes midtones. Basically, midtones are going to deal with skin tones and sometimes a bit brighter part, but not that much bright as highlights. So I'm going to take my midtones hue around 30, so it reaches an orange color. Around 24 itself it's good, but if you guys want to have a better look, you guys could take it around 30 or 35 or so it has an orange color. So if I just drag the saturation way up, you guys could see how it's affecting the skin tone of my subject. So I'm going to make my saturation around 0 so that I don't mess up with any kind of worse image. Then I'm going to drag my luminance around 29% or 30%, so this is going to brighten up my skin tones a little bit. And next comes highlights. Highlights are the brightest parts, just like this light I have over here and backside of the wall right here. So I would like to add a subtle teal effect, or I would like to add some yellows onto the image by taking my hue around 39% or 40%. So I'm going to drag my saturation way around 10% or so that looks perfect. And I'm going to drag my luminance down a little bit so that this is going to give me a balanced look. And finally comes global offset. So on my global offset, I could drag my saturation way up, and it's going to make the image more reddish since my hue is on the red color. And if I want to have my hue around blue or teal color to make the overall image more cool, I could take my hue around blue color and drag my saturation way up, and could take my luminance a little bit up so that the image is getting brightened much better. So I'm going to drag my hue around 28 or so, and I'm going to take my saturation way down. I think if I just leave the global saturation and hue, it's going to make the image better. So I'm going to take my luminance around 2%, and that looks pretty decent. Now let's go under the shadows, and there is an option called blending and balance on the shadows and the highlights. This is nothing but making your look subtle or taking your look pushed. If you guys want to have your looks too much pushed, you could simply take the blending amount and drag it to its right side so that it's going to give that pushed look for your image. So I'm going to take my blending around 64%. Even I go to midtones, my blending is at 64, or even I go to highlights, it's going to be 64. And finally comes balance. This is where the issue gets complicated. This balance slider is nothing but right side is going to be the highlights color and saturation, and the left side is going to be the shadows hue and saturation. So if you guys want to have more of a shadow look, you could drag the overall balance towards the negative side to give some more teal push to the image. But if you guys want to have an highlights oriented image, or if you guys want to have a warm image where I have given the highlights an yellow hue, I could drag my balance towards right side and make my image more kind of a highlight supported image. Since I would like to go for a teal look, I would like to take my balance around -11, and that looks pretty decent. So we have done with the color grading. And finally, if you guys want to give touches on to vibrance and saturation, I'm going to drag my saturation way around -10 or 11, and that fits perfect. That fits my look. And finally, I would like to and I think that looks pretty perfect. So we have taken this image into this image. So I think we have made a pretty decent change onto the image by using the color tab overall, and also the light tab. As I said, the light tab tutorial is linked in the description, so kindly check it out. And if you guys want to see some more example, let me show you. So this is a photo taken in a mountain place. So this looks pretty decent, right? But if I show you the before, you will be totally blown away how I use the color tab. So this is the before. Before itself looks pretty good, but if you guys want to make it more kind of a fantasy thing, you can change the overall colors just like this. And let me open up my color tab onto my HSL tab. I took my reds down way around -9 and increased the saturation, decreased the luminance so that I could get a color pop. And I took my hue of orange towards -32, dragged down my saturation, increased the luminance to brighten up those oranges. Even the yellows were done just like that. And finally, I took my greens to yellow side, and if I just drag it towards right side, you guys could see how the greens are getting affected. Here is how the blue thing works much better when it comes to this kind of color grading. So the hue is pushed way towards -43. In fact, if I want, I could even push it towards the aqua green color, but since I don't want to do that, I'm going to undo the change. And in fact, I could just drag down my luminance a little bit down, so that this is going to give a much more better fantasy look. So this is how it looks after doing all the changes using the HSL tab. And I have added some color grading options just like this. So I took my hue around 168, saturation around 7, and I dragged down my luminance, increased up my blending and balance towards the highlight side, took my midtones and placed it around orange color, and finally I gave my offset a little bit of a cool look. So I think this is pretty much done with this color tab. So now let me put some images on the screen on before and after on how I use the color tab. So it's going to blow your minds away. So here are some images. So that is it for this tutorial. Be pumped up for next tutorials where we'll be doing some effects like vignetting, sharpening, noise reduction, and finally some kind of chromatic aberration removal, and also some lens corrections just like this. So let me go with some final thoughts. So that is pretty much for wrapping up today's video. If you found this content more helpful, drop a like and comment below. And if you guys are new for the channel, make sure that you subscribe and turn on notifications. I guarantee you that you will not regret it. Follow me on Instagram, the link is in the description, so kindly check it out, and I'll be meeting you guys in my next video.